Om Shanti, good evening. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. And our theme in this session is pure awareness. So, first, we'll start with a reflection, creating that experience of being completely alone with my own company, solitude. Alone but not lonely. Welcoming that opportunity to stop running around in the outer world, living on the surface, and going deep, like going to the roots of a tree, caring for the self at the deepest level. And checking the self at the level of attitudes, perspectives, at the level of awareness. What sense of myself do I hold as I move through the day? And even as I'm sitting here now, do I have a temporary sense of self, a physical sense of self, a sense of self that's shaped by the outer world? Or do I have a sense of self that's based on the truth? Awareness is the very seed of my life. Every thought, word, and deed is shaped by my awareness. Om Shanti. Thank you again for joining tonight. This is part 2. So we had an earlier interview, which you can find on the BK Calgary YouTube channel on Pure Awareness. So this is a companion to that first interview. And we'll see where it goes. And it will go somewhere very soon. We had pure awareness that the volume was not on.
Om Shanti. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. And so, as Judy had mentioned, this is part 2. But if you haven't seen part 1, I don't really feel you're missing out. You're certainly more than welcome to go back to view. And so we were talking about awareness last week and came up during this reflection. And one of the questions that came to mind, and we mentioned a bit about it last week, about the difference between thought and awareness. And you had used the example, the wife who the individual who tells everyone and introduces herself as being the wife of the dean. But certain other questions came up near the tail end of last week's session. I thought it might be useful for individuals. And the dean, the dean before becoming a dean, stepping into that role. I'm sure that everyone has had that experience of stepping into a new job position, whatever it is, and especially if it's something that you're not familiar with. There is this word when something is just an idea or a concept, and to the point where it becomes one's identity. So, in terms of awareness, perhaps maybe back to that question, because I think it might be helpful for souls to understand the difference between just an idea, a concept, and awareness. This aspect about being aware of a soul, it seems like for that dean, so to speak, it takes time for them to get into that. What do you feel has been your experience? I know you had shared, maybe it was last week or previous sessions, that when you heard about soul consciousness in your first Raj Yoga course, there was a powerful connection that you made. But in terms of being able to move into that awareness, so to speak, so it's more than just an idea, but even to live that feeling that you made that connection between being a soul and self respect. Moving into that, so it's not just a concept. What has that experience been like for you?
It's funny as you were sharing, for whatever reason, I was thinking about little kids that play dress up. And perhaps souls listening remember doing that. And the idea being that you would put on a costume and then you would kind of get into the role of that costume and, use your imagination. And, definitely when we look at awareness, this idea, for example, of being a soul or any awareness, it's one thing to be a completely blank slate and be told you are this, which often happens with infants. So they're told you are male or female, you belong to this culture, you speak this language, and they're just like a blank slate. And they have no investments in anything, right? They're completely clean. And it's funny how they're colored and they take on that awareness, and it completely depends on what sort of, some call it imprinting in the animal kingdom, but it depends on what you're exposed to and you're colored, and it becomes what we call your reality. You're not imagining it, it is who I am, because I just was so easily colored by that. So that's if I'm a blank slate, but what if I already had the awareness and now I'm trying to take on another, switch over, convert to a different awareness? That's where I think it gets really interesting, especially if I feel I've invested a lot in that other awareness, switching over such that it becomes my reality, as you say, not imagined, but this is, and I know it's become my reality because I can access the capacities of that. And one of the stories I really like around that is from the Ramayana about Hanuman. And, in the Ramayana is about, really, it's a story about liberation of the soul. And there comes a point when this army of monkeys are going to try to free the one who has become jailed, if you will, in the cottage of sorrow. And the battle is not going well. And some of the soldiers, if you will, on the side that is for liberation have been mortally wounded. And there's really just one medicine that will heal them, manabahal. And so the life giving herb. And so it's a critical situation. And this herb is far away on some mountain top, and time is of the essence. And so they turn to Hanuman, who's a very loyal member of this monkey army, Hanuman, and say, "You must go get it." And he says, "Well, how am I going to go get it? I mean, it's so far away, and by the time I get it, they'll be dead." And, he says, "No, no, no, you don't understand. You can fly." And he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about." I said, "You don't know who you are, right?" He just thinks he's this monkey warrior and just your ordinary monkey warrior. And they explain to him, "No, no, you are the son of the god of the wind." He's like, "Excuse me?" And with a little convincing, it becomes his reality. He suddenly accepts, "I am the son of the god of the wind." And at that moment of accepting it, not as a nice romanticized idea, but as his "I am this," he is able to access these incredible capacities that were always there, but are linked to that awareness being real. So now he can suddenly, as the god of the wind, he can fly like the wind, right? And he has incredible strength like the wind. So he's able to achieve the mission. So we know that, it becomes our reality because it unlocks a whole different world of capacities. So that's really the difference. If I imagine it or romanticize, it's like watching something on the other side of a glass wall. I can see it, but I'm not actually accessing or connecting to it.
So it sounds like, though, there are many different, as you were saying, this awareness being soul, and there's other awarenesses we can take on. And why not just pick another awareness that one could just access certain capacities, like the dean and, I don't know, a really intelligent scientist or whatever the case is. I mean, one is accessing those capacities. So, because that could come up as a question.
Mm-hmm. I think a soul will only question the qualifications of the awareness he is choosing when he reaches a point in his life where he has a certain objective and realizes, I have to pick an awareness. It's got to be an awareness that matches with that objective. Yes, I could choose any awareness I want, but it's a bit like the yoga conversation, right? I can have yoga with anything I want, but is it going to help me achieve the objective?
Mm-hmm.
And, ultimately, the objective is peace and happiness. And I need an awareness that gives me a peace and happiness that is not dependent on external things, on temporary things. So I have to be very careful. And it turns out only the awareness that's based on something eternal or non-physical
Mm-hmm.
is going to enable me to reach that kind of destination. I think that there is a certain call of the time in this conversation that we, right now, as we sit here with a pandemic, we've reached a point in our journey through humanity where it's kind of this slow, gradual falling apart of the temporary, the physical, the external. It's all becoming very unstable, as if it's kind of this invitation nudging us towards an eternal awareness. So there's really two choices. There's a lot of variety in the temporary awareness, as you said, scientist, teacher. There's a lot of variety,
I
but
mean,
there's
there's
really
much to
only
choose from. It's like a
it's
buffet.
a buffet, but there's only one in the eternal, and that's an eternal being, a soul. And as things fall apart, it's almost inviting us to choose to look at that eternal. So there's a certain relevance, I suppose, in the awareness that I'm going to consider. And time might be helping me
Yeah.
to make a choice.
Could you elaborate on what eternal is? It's actually a pretty big
Mm-hmm.
word,
Mm-hmm.
and that did come up last week as one of the questions in connection to eternal truth and pure.
Yeah.
Actually,
So, in essence, eternal means immortal. So, does not die, timeless. So, the most simple example we can give is the example of this physical body in which I'm sitting. And I say that because it's quite interesting. I go to visit just the scenes in the drama. Um, one of these senior residences. And it's always very interesting when I visit because you're not quite sure what you're very aware of the how perishable the physical body is when you're visiting that demographic. These bodies are temporary; they're not eternal, and I think we all kind of know that. And when I say they're not eternal, yes, energy is eternal, but in this form, right? It's not that the energy is destroyed, it can't be, but in this form, it will transform into a different form that's simply not livable, right? We call it decomposition. So this is perishable. And if I think I am this body, that's not an eternal awareness because this body is not timeless, it is temporary in this form. And so we look at this sense of self. If I'm not this body, then what or who am I? And when we say I am a soul, that I am this timeless being that cannot be created or destroyed. So there's two different things. There's me, the soul, who is eternal or does not die, and there's the body that, if you will, does die. So which one am I going to choose to be? And as one gets closer and closer to the end of this package, I think that they come face to face with that question. But what would it be like, not just at the end, but to live one's whole life with the awareness that I am eternal? That's the question of spirituality.
So why is there quite a bit of fear then, in terms of, we might have talked about it before. I mean, spirituality can create, not spirituality self creates fear, but many have this fear of going into meditation or perceptions of what spirituality is. But what is that fear in terms of just considering myself to be a soul, or I don't have time, or there are doubts, or it's that feeling like you want to go there, but you just don't know how you can make that leap, and maybe that's not even conscious in their awareness.
Absolutely, everyone actually fears death. And in order to experience it's a funny thing, we're kind of caught between one death or another. So I can hang on to thinking I'm the body and experience that moment when I realize I'm not like that. I will have a fear of the body perishing because I think that's me. So we fear that form of death. But when we say, okay, I'm going to consider myself to be a soul, we kind of go through a different kind of death, in the sense that I'm going to have to massive detaching or reframing. And fear only comes where there's attachment. If there's no attachment, there's actually no fear. So I'm very attached to thinking I'm the body and all the things that go with that. It's funny, I think, even during these pandemic times, a little bit of anxiety or fear comes out in souls in the sense that not sure where it's all going, what's going to happen. Their attachments are being challenged. So there's a little bit of anxiety. But it's only where there's attachments that fear emerges. Now, the funny thing about experiencing myself to be eternal is I have no attachments when it comes to the corporeal realm. But to get there requires that I detach. from attachments. So it's that transition. Once I'm on the other side, it's fine, but it's getting there that challenges, really brings to light how many attachments we have. And ironically, a key part of purity is having no attachments.
What is this relationship then in terms of attachment to the body? Seems to be, a sense of identity than an ego,
Mm, yeah,
because that's a big part of
mhm.
what's going on, the sphere.
Yeah, so the question being, what am I attached to? And why do I attach to certain things? And, with when ego gets involved, we're talking about I'm attaching to things that have to do with my sense of value. And we even attach to things that don't make us particularly valuable. Sometimes we can't forget memories, but really it's all around this question of value. And that once value gets involved, the attachment becomes quite strong. So again, there's so much solution. When I say I am a soul, then my sense of value is restored back into the self, because the soul is the repository for all of the values. So to say I'm a soul, immediately, if I, again, genuinely, not just the thought, but genuinely go into the experience, I will experience my own value, which is why there was that feeling of self-respect. Until then, it will just be an idea, but that shift of value will not have happened. So I'll be trying to work both sides of the fence, right? And I'm sort of saying to myself, I'm a soul, but I'm not really getting the benefit of experiencing the intrinsic value of the self. And so I kind of keep on the side, or we say pocket money, some of these other attachments that make me feel valuable. It's a very delicate and patient operation, which is why one has to be so compassionate, because constantly these layers of attachment to value are being revealed, deeper and deeper forms of ego.
So, when we're completely affected by ego, it's certainly a certain kind of personality. Maybe not a pretty personality,
Mm.
or maybe it's a front, perhaps.
Mhm.
But this is where I think many find it gets quite abstract.
Mm.
And maybe it's not our original understanding, but now it feels so abstract.
Mm.
Is that we learn in the course that the soul, or I, the soul, have 7 qualities. These different qualities: love, peace, bliss, purity, truth, power, harmony. But when I'm not aware that I'm a soul,
Mhm.
like I'm still feeling and thinking. So if I'm practicing being soul conscious, does it mean I can't think? I can't feel? Like, does it mean that when I'm not aware I'm a soul, that everything I've been feeling is all wrong?
The idea, of course, is that we're always a soul.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite funny. I remember one of the first things I heard in the course was, whether it's soul consciousness or body consciousness, that's gotten into the soul. So I'm always a soul, but I might be body conscious, which means I'm a soul who thinks they're the body. It's kind of a funny situation. So I never stop being a soul, but how I act, how I think and feel will be dictated by my awareness. So when I think I am the body, then yes, ego emerges, and I, the soul, start to act through what we call an acquired personality. It's not really a pure form of those virtues. But when I go into that experience of being a soul, I actually get to experience, without trying to think about it or figure it out, I experience what those qualities are actually like. And otherwise, I'm left in this kind of theoretical, analytical place. What would peace be like? Well, I don't have to figure it out. It comes very naturally. It's like going up to a child and saying, what is innocence? They are innocent, so they don't think about being innocent. The moment I start to think or contrive, then I'm clearly in a body conscious place. It's still I, the soul, but I'm just in a body conscious place.
So, does everyone actually have access to those 7 different qualities and maybe not feel like they have the permission to feel them without any conditions?
Yeah, ego's going to shut down a lot of this activity. But yes, the idea being that, yes, we all have, this is actually the true definition of being a child of God. We all have these qualities. Um, how much we're able to experience them and integrate them into my day-to-day life is up to my own efforts. But we all have those qualities. And to be able to take the risk or the courage of, some use the word vulnerable, it's actually a very powerful state, but to the courage to step away from those old ideas and old ways and kind of be open. Because it's so indirect. It's saying, just consider yourself to be a soul, expose yourself to the Supreme Soul and see what happens. And we constantly, we see this a lot in physical fitness too. We say, okay, I've got it. But then we say, okay, but I think this is what it's going to look like. And we kind of jump to the outcome without actually using the method. So I sort of have to, as indirect as it may be, use the method and see what it produces. What is love when I consider myself to be a soul and remember the Supreme Soul? What does love look like? What does peace look like? Rather than my old ideas of what they look like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there a relationship then between awareness of soul versus just a thought, just a concept, and just being able to deeply access these as if it is my right to?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many layers to this because when we forget that we are souls and we become body conscious and start to act through the lens of body consciousness, we actually act in conflict with our true self, our core values, and that does put a weight on the soul. And so we actually sort of feel guilty until proven innocent, and we don't allow ourselves, we don't feel worthy enough to engage in certain self-care behavior, if you will. And then ego shuts it down. It gets very complicated in there as we're trying to do something so simple. So we have to have a really deep, again, that self-respect, very deep experience. This is why it's a pure awareness, is it says, even in the face of things in the conscience and these heaviness on the head, I still believe that I deserve to have these experiences. So to get to that point, I'd say unworthiness is such a, is the antithesis of pure awareness. It is such a, ego manages it and it totally shuts the soul down or gets us to deceive ourselves that something is happening and nothing really is happening.
So it's the I, the soul, even though I might be conscious I'm a soul or not conscious I'm a soul, conscious I'm a body. I'm operating, but I'm just not operating in a way that's really a reflection of who I really am.
Yeah, it's not really getting a chance to align completely with the truth.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So there was something that you'd shared earlier, if we could touch upon it when we were talking about detachment.
Mm.
It has often um, been something that comes up as comments that come from many of the sessions, many of the Raja Yoga Foundation sessions, and many fear that practice or even the word of detachment, perhaps it usually comes up as I'm not supposed to feel anything, I'm supposed to disconnect, I'm supposed to step away. But it was quite interesting you were talking about when there's attachment, there's a lot of fear because of losing, fear of losing something. And perhaps then maybe that is why that there is such a fear of this word detachment, because it's in the context of feeling attachment.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of pieces. I think it definitely pushes that button of fear with respect to attachment, but also we're a little melodramatic and suffer from a lack of imagination, and we just kind of say detachment is bad word. It means cold, and go into this, and if we use it in a certain way, we'd be quite happy with it. I'm going to detach from what is painful, or I'm going to detach from um, kind of a heavy situation. So it depends how we use it, but it's actually an extremely healthy word. And to have a very pure, clean experience of it. Often the example we use is people love the term unconditional love. They love it, right? They love it, to think about unconditional love. And of course, that means a love with no conditions, unconditional love. And if we said detached and loving, then they get nervous, although they're exactly the same thing. Detached means no strings attached. It's the exact same thing. So again, when I am in the right awareness, I hear these words properly. And I don't have to analyze or figure it out. I just hear them proper. I'm able to catch the fragrance of them, what they have to do with self-care and benevolence. So it's a really, detachment is purity. It's a very important part of a healthy life. It is because we hang on so tightly to things that there's actually sorrow. I think that detached becomes connected to not caring or irresponsible. I'm not sure why, because we'd use those words if that's what it meant. Um, it actually puts me into a place where I can be much more caring and much more responsible because I'm not biased. I don't have selfish motives. I mean, the list goes on and on. So it's actually such a healthy word. I think, the example we often use, of course, is the emergency response team, where if anyone has ever been in a scenario where EMT or EMS has shown up, and the one thing I love is their detachment. If they showed up like crazy people, extremely reactive, I would send them away. They'd be no use to me. But it's actually their objectivity, their detachment, their skill set stays intact. They're useful. That makes them so powerful, so able to care. So I think it's just looking. It's so connected to purity. We again like the term pure love as well. Pure love, unconditional love, detached and loving. They're all the same.
Some might just feel quite stuck and not know what to do, though, and some know that I work in nursing, and so I do work with psychiatrists. And keeping this extremely general, of course, is that I've seen notes from psychiatrists and those who work with individuals who've gone through quite a bit of trauma, and they're writing in the report, say this individual, because of their trauma, they, when they're sharing, they're very detached, and you can feel that when they're sharing, it's actually a reaction that they have to cut off any sense of feeling because of pain. And so now some are stuck, like I really want to be able to, have a healthy, it's obviously more than I want a healthy relationship with this word. It's more like I want to be able to have a healthy relationship with being able to um, have that healthy space between me and these things that I've become attached to.
So I think, what happens is we kind of have an incomplete picture because what you've described is actually very disconnected.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We started off by talking about the eternal. So when I say I am detached, I'm actually detached from, the illusions or the temporary. I'm actually quite attached to what is eternal or very connected, which is why that word detached is so healthy. Detached in the sense that, I'm not affected or caught up in the temporary. I'm very attached to what is eternal. So I come in with this deep connection to being a soul and all the capacities of the soul. So we could say attached to that. And therefore, I am able to be, the word I think freedom is closest to what we're talking about, able to be free from being affected by the temporary and have that integrity of purity or spirituality. This is very different from disconnecting or disassociating, where you're not attached to anything. You're kind of dead.
Which is why many feel soul. They may not say it, but when they hear consider myself to be a soul, what they feel is I'm supposed to feel nothing.
Yeah, because soul has not come to life for them. It's a meaningless term. You know, I haven't really, it's a very strange situation. I think it's always good to start the conversation with the question, do you believe that you are a soul? You may not be feeling it, but do you believe it? You know, it's almost like someone who has developed paralysis. I don't feel it. I know that I've got legs, but I just don't feel anything. So, first ask, do you believe that you are a soul, or do you think you're the body? Because if they don't even think, even believe that they are a soul, it's going to be very difficult, but totally understandable, because it's just so rusty, this awareness of being a soul. So I can say, yeah, no, I do feel that we are souls. I don't think we are the bodies. And so much of what we seek in terms of human rights in a caring world is based actually on not thinking we're the bodies. So I do believe we're not the bodies, but am I feeling it? No, because the forces, again, they've gotten so much into me, the soul. So we call it the kingdom has been overturned, right? So body consciousness got so deep that soul consciousness actually almost feels numb. Yeah. So I have to kind of wake it up, patiently wake it up. I am a soul, so I must have that capacity to feel it. But it's really been a long time. It's like Sleeping Beauty in there. So it's more just patiently giving that time and knowing that fear is going to keep closing, slamming the door of experience shut. So I have to gently reassure the self, you know, okay, I'm not the body. It's okay. I'm still here. Like I literally have to talk to myself in a reassuring way as I start to die to that old relationship with the body. That, okay, there's the body and there's me. I have lost nothing from having that awareness. So to really sort of talk the self through that fear.
This is actually quite connected, and maybe it's connected to the topic that was in the Raja Yoga Essentials. But what is God, the Supreme Soul's purpose in terms of supporting that experience of being a soul?
I can't imagine trying to do this without some other soul that to get you on the other side. You know, we're talking about a being who never forgets their soul, like they live in that reality. The one soul of the family of souls who stays in that state and so earns this title of God. And it's so helpful to have someone there that you know, even it's been known, you know, even at the time of so-called dying, what we perceive as dying, you know, souls being alone is the worst. And this idea of remember God, remember God, remember God, go to God, you're not alone. Like, so it's very beautiful to be able to connect to a being, and that also takes time. Connect to a being who's always in that state. So it really feels like you're very supported in moving back into soul consciousness. You're not alone.
No, we can certainly keep going on. I would love to. I mean, I feel like that this is such a key piece of what we were sharing about in terms of yoga, and so we really welcome others to be able to look at those sessions. The Raja Yoga Essentials. It was a two-part session of yoga, but I regret we are running out of time. So perhaps maybe we'll have a little reflection about awareness. Thank you for joining.
We live in a very complicated world, largely the result of thinking we are physical beings. And that complicated world is now in a state of sorrow, confusion, uncertainty, instability, chaos. If the source of that was just thinking I'm the body, then the solution is equally simple. If on one side I simply forgot myself, all I have to do is remember myself, the authentic self. Through the physical eyes, I can see this physical body. It is perhaps the most intimate relationship I have with anything of this physical world. But if I am completely honest, I know very little about this physical body on a deep level, how it works, how it functions. I don't even know how to control many of the functions. It is a wonder, there is no doubt. But as I observe it, I begin to feel that it is separate from me, the one observing. It's not frightening. If anything, it's rather fascinating to think of myself in this very unique, powerful way. I am the observer, the one who is thinking, reflecting. I can feel how the sensations of the body pull me, make me feel I am the body. And yet I'm still able to observe. That power to observe makes me aware I am separate. Observing from this place behind the forehead, concentrating all my energy there. I experience the point, the presence of myself, I the thinker. And suddenly the body starts to fade out of focus. It's still there, but I'm deeply concentrating on my own presence. I, the one using this body. I will continue to experiment, not being clever or intellectual, at a very concrete, basic level, exploring this relationship between me, the thinker, the soul, and this body. Om Shanti.
Thank you. So thank you those for joining. And we'll pass it over to Judy once again to us to share with us about the next coming
Mm.
sessions. Not just this week, but some that might be of relevance actually for the weekend as well, for those who will watch the archived session or are right there with us.
Mhm.
Om Shanti.
Thank you, Nora. So we have another interview. We have them Tuesdays and Thursday nights. So Thursday focuses on the basics of Raj Yoga. Oh, this will be exciting. It's karma. That is such a hot topic. That should be fun. So, karma. And then going into the weekend, we do have this weekend, next weekend. So, if you're watching this archived, we're referring to September 19th, 20th, and 26th and 27th from 1 to 2 p.m. on the Zoom platform. We'll be offering the Raj Yoga experience. So each of these are 1 hour sessions, 1 to 2 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, 4 sessions in total, looking at the very basics of Raj Yoga in a very essenceful form. So essenceful and experiential. So that might support if there's that curiosity about what is this soul consciousness and God and everything else. Feel free to join that. So that's on our website, the information and the Zoom link, etc. So you're welcome to explore there for more details and how to register. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until we connect again, Om Shanti.